Welcome everybody to the final video of the leadership unit. We'll talk very briefly about public speaking. You will have an opportunity to do a speech, and I know that you will not have the opportunity to be in front of an audience if you are completely online, and that's fine. There are other ways to do it. We'll do a little Flipgrid video. So we will do some public speaking during this particular unit. I have to admit that this is one of those things that I wish that I was better at. Um, I have done public speaking for many, many years. When I was in high school, I started out by doing creed speaking, and then I did prepared public speaking. But with me, prepared public speaking meant that I had written a speech and I memorized the speech, and then I went and performed the speech. And I'm one of those people that if I got a word off here or there, it threw me off completely. So I found out that prepared public speaking was not necessarily my thing. My thing was extemporaneous speaking, which you do see on the screen. We'll talk a little bit more about, but extemporaneous really was more impromptu. And so I really would love to be able to be one of those people that could just go out and do a motivational speech, but yeah, I'm not quite there. But types of speeches, informative means that you are providing information to somebody. This is what we're doing now. It's me providing information to you about leadership in agriculture. So, informative is what you're going to get from your teachers on a daily basis. Persuasive, you hear a lot of persuasive speeches this time of year in particular, or this particular year, because it is an election year. And because it is an election year, then you hear lots of persuasive speeches, people trying to convince you to think or vote one way or another. So you're trying to sway the mind of the audience. Extemporaneous, I mentioned this word a while ago. It's a big word, but basically it means that you are speaking off the cuff without having a lot of information ahead of time. Most of your speaking during the day is extemporaneous. Most people, when they go and hang out with their friends, don't have notes prepared when they go to speak to them. They know that they have an idea they want to say to somebody, but they're not necessarily preparing word for word what they're going to say ahead of time. So extemporaneous just means that they're impromptu speeches and you are kind of speaking off the top of your head. This one can get you in trouble sometimes if you're not prepared ahead of time, but most of the speaking that you do during the day is going to be that impromptu, extemporaneous speaking. Just like a good essay, a speech should have three basic parts: an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Now, typically the introduction is going to be something that grabs the attention of the audience. A lot of times people use stories. It kind of gets you in there, it gets you motivated to listen, gets you excited to listen and want to know more. So the introduction should be something that really grabs the attention of the audience. Otherwise, they are not necessarily going to pay attention to what you have to say. Once you do get them, and you've got their attention, then you can move on to the body. And the body's kind of like that middle part of your essay where you have those 3 points. Not necessarily always 3 points in a public speech, but they should be done in a logical order. And that way you don't sound like you're just kind of rambling along. So you want to make sure that you're prepared enough to know, what kind of order that you want to go in as far as the body. And this is really as they call it, the meat and potatoes of the speech itself, because that's where your information is going to be conveyed to your audience. Once you get finished with that part, you're going to do a conclusion, and the conclusion should typically be something that moves people to action, something that makes people go out of that speech or that auditorium or gymnasium or wherever they are listening to your speech and want to go and do something. So the conclusion should summarize the main points of what it is that you're talking about, but it should also give people a reason to want to remember what it was that you had to say. So the conclusion should be, a lot of times the conclusion ends up being something that people just kind of tack on at the end, but it really has an opportunity to be something that's powerful and make people really remember what it was that you had to say. In preparing for a speech, the first thing you need to do is to figure out why you are giving the speech. What is it that you're supposed to be talking about? Um, what is it that you have been asked to speak about? What's the purpose? If it's not something that you have expertise on, you might want to contact that person and say, well, I don't have the biggest expertise on this, but could we talk about that? So the purpose really needs to be something that you know and you understand and you have a little bit of expertise on. You want to make sure that you are considering who you're speaking to. I always tell this story whenever I talk about public speaking. Several years ago, we had a meeting, and it was a county-wide meeting. Every employee in the entire county had to go. In fact, it was such a big thing they had to divide everybody up into two groups. And so the Crest and Burns zone and then the Kings Mountain and Shelby zone went to two different meetings. They counted attendance. Everybody had to be there. And it was before school started. And those work days right before school start are very busy. Teachers are frantically trying to get their stuff together. They're decorating their rooms, they're making copies, and we all wanted to be in our rooms getting ready for school to start, but we had to be at this mandatory meeting. Well, this mandatory meeting was about evaluations and teachers being evaluated in their classroom. And more or less, they told us that we shouldn't be keeping you in a classroom for a 90-minute period and talking at you for a 90-minute period. And that was, part of the evaluation process. But the way that they presented it was they talked to or at us for an hour, hour and a half, and did exactly what they told us not to do. And so, because we were all wanting to be in our classrooms, I don't think I remember much about that entire meeting, except there was a particular history teacher from our school that was sitting behind me, and I know that he snores because I heard him behind me snoring. That's the only thing that I learned during that meeting. So, consider your audience. Make sure that you are taking them into consideration, their feelings and their time into consideration whenever you are speaking. And you also want to make sure that you are given an appropriate speech for where you are, what occasion that it actually is. When you're choosing a topic, we already talked about this a little bit, make sure that it is something that you know. If it's something that you're interested in, then you're going to have more of an expertise in that. You're going to be more interested in writing the speech. You're going to be more interesting whenever you actually give the speech. And so make sure that it's a topic that you're interested about, that you're knowledgeable about. Make sure it's something that your audience would actually be interested in. And, think about it before you actually write the speech. When you go into a speech and you have things prepared ahead of time, it really helps to make you look like you're on the ball and you've got your stuff together. So make sure that you choose something that's going to be beneficial for you and for your audience. You're going to gather material from different places. Of course, we have the internet. Everything that's on the internet is not always true. So make sure that you are using reputable sources. Make sure that you write those sources down so that you can go back to them, or at least, get you a Google Doc and copy those links into your Google Doc so that you can go back to them. Because I'm constantly finding something on the internet and I'm like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. And then I forget where I found it. So make sure that you are keeping documentation of your sources. Creating an outline helps to get your ideas and thoughts organized. Write the speech the way you talk, but don't use slang terms. You're going to see this if you choose the Walter Bond speech for your speaking assignment that you have in this module. He talks about the fact that his wife told him how to not speak whenever he goes into a country club. So you do want to consider the way you're speaking, but you also don't want to put people out and make people uncomfortable by using slang terminology. You want to be enthusiastic, you want to smile, you want to use gestures, but you don't want to use gestures that are so outlandish that you look like you are trying to land a plane, and it becomes distracting. So So, use gestures, but kind of keep them toned back if at all possible, so that you're not distracting people. Make sure that you have good eye contact. Um, I know of a teacher that great person, but every time I speak to him, he actually stares right over my head. And I don't know if it's one of those things where he just can't make eye contact with people. But it's kind of weird because I'm thinking, what is over the top of my head? So make sure that you have good eye contact and be sincere when you are presenting your speech, because if you don't believe you, other people are not going to believe you. So make sure that you are sincere whenever you're actually speaking. And that is it. So you're going to have an opportunity to watch a speech. You're going to have an opportunity to give a speech. In the module, there are 3 speeches that I give you from the National FFA Convention. 3 of my favorite speakers, Rick Rigsby and Walter Bond and Nick Vujicic, and either one of them is great. I can't pick one over the other one, but do take an opportunity to check out one of those speeches. If you have questions or you need to talk to me, make sure that you tune in during office hours. And that's it for the leadership unit. So we will be talking again in the next unit, and see you soon.